This gorgeous high-end piece I found on Pinterest was actually a video, so I had to keep pausing to try and get good pictures so we can dupe this. We're gonna need 2 of Dollar Tree's wall wood hanging decor pieces, and we're gonna just chop off the little hangers because we're not going to need those. On the Pinterest piece, there were 2 gold frames. I wanted a thicker frame and found these wall decor pieces at Dollar Tree and just grabbed these up. I figured they would work perfectly until I realized I couldn't pop them out. So I had to think. And then I brought in the hammer, this little tiny baby hammer, so we could just tappity tap, tap, tap right on the backs of these and pop them right on out. It worked like a charm, luckily. Just brace the frame on something and you're good to go. Dollar Tree really is making some quality stuff when you can't even break something on purpose these days. I removed the hangers on both the boxes because we're not going to be needing any of them, and then grabbed the sander just to get any of the extra crusty bits that were left after hammering out the back. So this way it's smoothed on down. I did not like that you could still see the wood, and to make sure it looked just as high end as I could get it, I grabbed some white paint and went around the entire piece. I'm going to be using Dollar Tree's wallpaper in this design to wrap around our wood pieces. Keep in mind, they do not cover this entirely, and I know some of you, the little break would bother you in the design. So you make sure you get some contact paper that would cover the whole piece. Or if you want it, you could add some spackling to the holes and then sand that down and paint it up whatever color you want, or stain it up whatever color you want. I really loved this greenery and wanted to apply it onto our wood piece. And these wallpaper sheets are super easy to use. I cut the corners like this so that way once I wrapped it around, there was a little bit of overhang, and then I could trim it to make sure that there was nothing showing. I took some tacky glue and hot glue and attached little beads right over the hanger holes to create feet. Then I applied more tacky glue and hot glue to the insides where we're going to place our first shelf. I made sure not to overlap them so they don't cancel each other out. And then I grabbed the shelf and gently placed it so it overhung on the outside just a little bit, and then did the same thing on the other piece. I applied the top shelf on and I let this dry overnight to ensure that everything was glued really well together before I started using it. As always, people, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. I appreciate you, and until next time, bye! Starting with these little snowman pieces so we can create an extremely high-end looking riser. I actually got this idea from Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Designs. If you flip these suckers upside down, smoosh a little bit of glue right on the bottom of them and attach them to pretty much anything, you can get a really high-end looking riser. Now we're gonna have to let this sit, and by letting it sit, I mean also grabbing some stuff to weigh it down so this way that tacky glue gets a pretty good hold. I went to Home Depot and picked up this beautiful metallic silver spray paint for just a little over $6. Now spray paint however you want, people. I'm flipping mine upside down and then I'm gonna do the top. And for my ASMR lovers, I got your back. This would look absolutely stunning in a bathroom with some decorative soaps, or in a bedroom holding some jewelry. It is so stunning. I used a little LED light here and wrapped some Dollar Tree's metal lace around it with some river rocks, and it's simply perfection to me. One more time. Okay, I'm done. Or am I? I'm just kidding. Isn't it pretty? This one's really pretty with the bright green and the gold. Some of these have little tassels dangling off of them, which is great because I really hate making tassels, so I'm gonna hoard them suckers for later. I just took it off and plopped it over in my pile to the side of the table. And be mindful when you're opening these, because certain ways they won't extend fully, and then other ways like this one, it extends all the way out and you can see the entire fan. For this tabletop decor piece, I wanted the fan to extend the entire length of the tray here. And I'm going to use a little floral foam scrap piece that I had sitting along the side because I just needed 2 small sections to be able to brace the fan right in the center. Well, not exactly in the center, on the sides of the center, because if you notice the center kind of sticks down a little bit, and I wanted it to have a brace, and the floral foam provided that for me and allowed me to plop the ends of the fan in place and hold it once I glued it. For a long hold, I'm going to be using tacky glue to assist me with the hot glue. I want to make sure that the fan stays open, and there are a couple ways you can go about this. For this particular project, I just decided to make sure I use some tacky glue and some hot glue on each side of the ends of our fan. This way the design stayed completely displayed. I had some hot glue foam sticks sitting around and put them suckers in my hot glue gun and went ham where I had the little floral foam pieces on each side just to ensure that this was going to stay in place when I had it all put together. To fill up the tray, I'm just using some of the little river rocks from Dollar Tree. Put whatever you want in here and use whatever color fan and tray you want to recreate this for what works for your home decor. I personally wanted to bring out that white and added a white candle and some white florals into our floral foam, and I love this so much. We're gonna just need one, that's right, just one little burlap canvas, and we're gonna want to flip it on its back and grab something to catch the paint through our stencil like this napkin. I'm just kidding, people. We're not really going to use the napkin. We're going to grab this little styrofoam piece and put behind here. This is just to catch the paint that is going to come through when we're tappity tapping it on top of our stencil, because obviously burlap is thin, it's fabric, and it's going to smoosh on in there. We don't want to ruin our surface we're working on. I also realized that the stencil was kind of popping up a little bit, so I took some painter's tape and put it in several sections that fit inside the canvas with the stencil before I started, and I made sure to fully load my little brush that I'm using and then offload it before I started my stenciling. If you need any stencil information, I actually have a how-to stencil tutorial. I can put it down in the description box for you for more information. Stenciling fabric can be a tricky thing, so I tend to swirl my brush as I'm applying the paint. It doesn't really sit on top of the material like it does a wood or it does a piece of paper, and then slowly absorb in. It absorbs in right away. So the swirl motion just helps give you more control of your application. And if you find that you have some bare spots, you can take a thin brush that's a little bit thinner than the stencil and go over on the inside with the paint color, making it deeper in the sections you feel are a little bit lighter. And check this out. Look how flawless this is. Now we're gonna bring in the tacky glue because I want to put a little frame around this. I'm sure I could add some wood and, you know, Home Depot trim that I love, but I found this lace at Dollar Tree and I have been holding onto it for just this occasion. And I decided to, instead of wrapping it around the edges, which you could also do and that would look nice as well, I took it and cut it like I would on a 45-degree angle, a piece of wood, and attached each piece. Now this is a little painstaking with the patience when you're measuring fabric versus wood, and it's not exact, so you might have to stretch it out just a smidge to get it right in that crease to meet up. But I highly recommend using the tacky glue because it's manipulatable versus using a glue gun. Then when you've got it in the spot that you want it in, you can take some hot glue or fabric glue if you have that little hot glue, fabric glue, and attach it. I decided to just pop it right in the corners while this dried, you know what I'm saying, and put it off for a day just to make sure that it was, you know, all nice and together before I showed you the reveal. Now I felt this need a little bit of something, so we're gonna need to bring in the stapler. And let's talk about this stapler because I probably get about 100 questions a month about this sucker all the time. It's famous. It is an arrow stapler and it is from Home Depot. This is not sponsored, by the way. However, I've tried several different staplers. This is really easy to open, close. It is also easy for me to squeeze the staple out of without having to apply a lot of pressure. And as many of you know, I struggle with hand grip strength. So I love using this piece. It was a little tiresome at first learning it because it's easy to get it turned around. But I hope this answers a lot of questions for those of you that are asking where I got it from, what's the brand. Now you know. Let's make a wall pocket with these two 5x7 burlap canvases. And I know what you're thinking, Brandy, that line, ew. Listen, we're gonna cover it up, okay? Just be patient and roll on with me. First, let's attach these suckers with some tacky glue and some hot glue, okay? Just a little bit of hot glue to get that immediate hold, and that tacky glue is gonna make sure that this don't go nowhere for the long haul. And while we're at it, we should just bring the stapler in. If you're on Team Miter Shears, I'm sorry, but it's all about the stapler today. And per usual, I didn't bother to check to see if the staples were in here when I went to do this, so. Really? And I felt like, you know what? This is a teachable moment. Check out how easy this is to just plop these suckers right on in here and roll on with your DIY project. Now it's time to pick your fabric, and I just decided to stay neutral, and truth be told, this was the only fabric I could find because I've been organizing my area, and you know what, I just threw this on here. So pick something pretty, okay? This matched, it worked for what I needed to work it for, which was to give you this idea. I cut this down to size, just short of where our little crease was and just above the bottom of our burlap canvases. Again, we're bringing the stapler. I told you, we're going to be bringing the stapler in, okay? Today is the stapler's day. Or just hot glue everything because, you know, I know some of you do that. But if I want to resell these things, I need to make sure that they're not going to fall apart later. So I use staples and tacky glue and hot glue and all the... Okay, moving on. So I have this sped up slightly because it's kind of hard to explain. But I'm folding the fabric over so you cannot see the staples where I'm stapling it. And then I'm taking an extra piece of burlap to put at the top to completely cover the crease, and I'm going to use this little decorative, you know, ornate piece of ribbon to put right over the line where the two meet for a decorative accent. And yes, I'm using staples with my mini stapler to attach the other two pieces of fabric together, and using the tacky glue to apply the little decorative ornate piece of ribbon. I also tucked in tacky glue in every little section I could, just to make sure that this sucker was going to be put together really well, and applied our little piece of ribbon. This also hides, you know, the staples I put in there and the little crease, and just makes it look a little bit more professional. Now on the sides, this is where I always struggle whenever I am DIYing anything, because you can leave it like that. Some people like those looks, or you can cover it up. And when you're doing fabric, you have to be mindful creating a pocket, because you can create it so tight you can't fit anything in it. So this is definitely a stretch and staple as you go, and check the depth or the width that is inside by tucking your hand in there as you're stapling, trying to make sure that the fabric is all matching and aligning, because if you pull too tight in one side and it has a pattern on it, especially with this particular design I'm using, it could be lopsided and look really awful on the finish. I took some scissors and just cut any excess off around the back, and grabbed some Dollar Tree's nautical rope and more tacky glue and hot glue, and went little section by little section, applying this around the edge to cover up them staples. And of course, use whatever you want to cover this up. You could use twine, you could use a different type of ribbon, you could put some little beads, little half beads all around the edge. The possibilities are endless with this, or just leave it, you know what I mean? Brad nails would also look super cute. I had all the thoughts, you know, all the thoughts, but decided because of the color situation that I was using that the nautical rope would match fairly well. I did think that it looked really unfinished on the edge where the rope kind of met the burlap, and grabbed some little wooden buttons to pop right on in there. And whoever said crafting was not a messy job obviously is not doing it correctly. Because I had stuff all over my fingers. Tacky glue, hot glue, all the things. Use whatever you want to put a hanger on here. I just took some of this macrame cord I found at Dollar Tree, added some greenery in this sucker, and a little laser cutout on the front of our pocket, and I simply love this piece. People, I love making book decor. It's one of my favorite things to DIY. And I love it so much also because it's inexpensive, and you can make 1, 2, 3, 4, as many as you want, and still elevate any look in your home. I was low on chalk paint, but I recommend using chalk paint for this. I mixed some acrylic paint and some chalk paint to get like a off-white, bright white base for our book, and make sure you let it completely dry before you start decoupaging it. We're going to seal up the book first. Now this, you can skip this step if you do not care if your book is sealed. I sell a lot of my book decor, and it is just a preference. I'm still tweaking this just a bit, but for right now, my favorite way to do this is to take some tacky glue and some hot glue, and I alternate between pages. And I don't do every page. I do like how you see me literally flipping through, and I do about 3 passes of this until I can turn the book on its side and kind of wiggle it. And for the most part, I see clumped up pages. And again, you can skip this part if you want, but since I do put a lot of things on this book, I don't want to chance it kind of flopping open and then a piece breaking off or something like that. I try to make them as sturdy as possible. To finish it off, I take more of the tacky glue and smear it on the outside pages, and so far this has been working pretty well. And this is our beautiful napkin we're going to be using for this book. I bought this specifically for this project. I do not plug myself very often, but I get asked a ton of questions. I do have a website, thediystruggle.com, where I sell napkin bundles and printable downloads. I wanted to create a space where you guys could have access to the things that I use in my content, and this really helps me do that. So the link is always down in the description box. I'm using the entire napkin mostly to cover the book. And since there isn't enough napkin to go around, we're going to have to kind of tear it right down the middle. So I measured till I was happy about where I wanted to place the napkin, and then just ripped it right down the center. We're going to actually use a clay mold for the spine of the book. So we're going to blend that all in, and we're just going to kind of get the sneaky layers off. So we just have our top layer. If you struggle doing this, there are a few different techniques you can use. One is taking some Mod Podge and putting it on 2 fingers to get those extra little sneaky layers off. Or another that I like that's quick and easy, you just see me do, is to rip a part of the napkin, and then you can usually see them. You can just grab them suckers and then throw your extra to the side. And a third, if you're really struggling, is to take 2 pieces of painter's tape, put them on a corner opposite ends, and then pull them apart, and they'll come off that way too. Most of the time for applying your Mod Podge, I can use any acrylic brush, but I like using on detail projects and things that I'm going to be selling little fan brushes. Because once I get to the ends, the fan brush is so thin, it allows me to go around the edges of the paper or the napkin, should say napkin, my bad, it's a napkin. Allows me to go around the napkin and just get in there. It allows me to smoosh a little bit of the Mod Podge right underneath the napkin and then just kind of paint it down. And for those of you that are like, iron on method is the best, I get I get that comment so much, where I got that one iron on method warrior that is like, I need to let her know. I am aware. Thank y'all so much. I know the iron on method is the best for making sure there's no wrinkles. I only like using that on wood. I do not like using that on metal. I do not like using that on my books. Does not yield well for me. I prefer this method and taking the sponge and the sponge molds to what I'm doing. To each their own, you know what I mean? Different strokes for different folks, people. I am here entertaining and offering you my non-professional wisdom. On the top cover of this book, I decided I wanted to tear a corner because we're going to be creating a raised brick stencil on this as well. So I wanted to just give it a different level, create a little vintage-ish going on. And here's me doing the little tuck in method. See how I'm using this to just kind of press around the edges to see if anything's loose and smacking on back down to the book. Super quick and easy. Not this quick. I gotta sped up for y'all. Otherwise, it took me 3 days to make this book. In case anybody's wondering, 3 days. 3 days of waiting patiently for all the drying going. It was horrible. Okay, I'm done. Let's move on. Once the first day of the drying rolled around, I went ham on this sucker with sandpaper. I took some water, I went around all the loose bits, I then took an 80 grit and I got everything off. And then I took some more Mod Podge and I sealed everything on down really nice to the book. Now it's time for the fun part, to take some clay and some molds and add some pieces onto our book. We're going to use this Prima mold to add on our spine. This is my favorite clay, the paper clay. I've used a lot of clay. I have carpal tunnel. I talk about this all the time, and it is just easy to mold. So this is why it's my favorite. In addition to, I can sand it lightly and I can put it on furniture. I have not had any issues with this at all. I really like it. It is air dry as well. You do not have to put it in the oven or anything like that. You just gotta wait 24 hours. I know the dry times. I use wood glue for this. If you do not want to use wood glue, I would recommend using Gorilla Glue Gel or E6000 if you like E6000. I try to stay away from that stuff unless I don't have my Gorilla Glue Gel or my wood glue. You could even use Tacky Glue if you wanted. That would probably yield a good bond. Don't be afraid to press this stuff down. Don't get wild with it and try and smush it, you know what I mean? But you can definitely like press it down gently. My mold, you can see, was not long enough to do the whole spine of the book, so I just added an extra little piece and I'm taking a clay tool and just kind of pressing it down so it just meets up. If you don't want to do this part, another thing that I have done is take little stickers to add to the ends, or you could take half of little beads, or you could use a stamp to put little stamps on the bottom. Since I have butterflies in the napkin, I popped out 2 little butterfly pieces to give it a 3D effect on the top of the book. And just in case you're wondering, everything you're seeing me use here with the clay tools, the molds, the clay itself, that is all down in the description box in my Amazon store. When I tell y'all I want you to be able to recreate the things that I make so I can try to make sure you have access to them, I am not kidding. Unless it's my Dixie Belle paint, then I mean, that stuff's not easy to come by. And if I do think that I'm using something you guys don't have access to, I always try and offer you other options. For this next part, before we let the book sit and dry another night, we're going to put a raised stencil on here. I'm taking a little bit of spackling and I am smooshing in these two acrylic paint colors. If you do not have these fancy schmancy little spreaders, a spoon will work. I picked these up in a pack from Ross. If you guys are not following me on browsing channel, I do have a browsing channel where I do a lot of shopping and I show you guys where to pick up things and, you know, budget friendly, inspirational stuff. Have I plugged myself enough in this video? But I picked this up in a pack. It is super cheap. You get paintbrushes, all kinds of stuff. And Ross usually has these for $4.99. The stencil that we're using is like a brick stencil, and this I picked up in a pack off of Amazon. I'm not completely blending both of the paints together. I'm kind of just putting a little bit on one section and a little bit on the other section of the spatula, and then just kind of going over in spaces in the stencil to create an ombre effect. Feel free to skip this part altogether. I just wanted to add something extra, give you guys a little bit extra idea to kind of elevate your book decor if you like making book decor, or if you just want to hang out with me today. How many of y'all are just here hanging out with me? I love y'all, you know I do. Now, the next day, okay, we let this dry 24 hours. We let this dry 24 more hours, okay? And then we're giving it a good test go. I'm pulling, I'm poking, I'm taking my fingernail, I'm digging it into different sections. I want to make sure that this is ready for me to do extras to it and to put a seal over it, so once I go to then sell it, I don't have things falling apart. I like using acrylic paints on the clay for intricate things like this because it absorbs really well. Chalk paint will get clumpy. I don't mind that on my furniture pieces because I can sand, but for something like this, I'm using acrylic paints and just taking colors that make sense for the napkin of the book. And yes, it's sloppy, I know. We're going over this with some dry brushing to kind of blend in all the things so it looks like one cohesive piece. And then I'm gonna pop back in with some gilding wax to give those highlights. If you do not have a gilding wax, you can come in with a chalk paint, a darker color, and go over them lightly with a little bit on your finger, and it is going to help the details of your clay piece pop out. But first, you're going to want to take a dry brush like I'm doing here and just lightly go over everything to really blend it together. I am starting with a black. I do come back in off camera with a silver. After it dried, I was like, oh, it needs a little something extra because I just can't leave things alone. For the finishing touch, I just took some burlap and a little bit of nautical rope and tied around. I added a couple little trinkets to it, and the floral is just kind of sitting on the top there for decoration. I don't want to try and ship that and have it get mooshed. Next project, we're going to need 4 of the larger palettes, and I'm going to just paint them with some Waverly White and a little bit of water. I like to mix them together. It's a quick and easy way to get the palettes all covered. I've done that in past videos, but I want to save you your viewing time here. Make sure you let your palettes dry really well, especially if you're going to glue them together. If not, you know, glue is not going to work well on a damp surface, okay? You don't need me to explain that to you, but if you do, let me know in the comments. I'll have a conversation with you. For the sake of how tiny the space was that I was using to glue these together, I just used hot glue, but I did go over these and paint some wood glue over top of it for a longer hold. I always tell people, do not just use hot glue on your products. If someone is telling you just use the hot glue, that's fine for crafter's sake if you're just like keeping something and you don't care if it falls apart, but hot glue will wear, especially if you leave it in the sun, it will melt. Try and put some E6000 wood glue or some of my favorite Gorilla Glue gel on your products for that long lasting bond. So this way, if the hot glue on your project is having a bad day, you know, the Gorilla Glue gel has its back and it's going to hold your stuff together. Once you have all your little sides together, you could leave it like this, but I'm going to take this stick. I do not remember if I picked this up from Hobby Lobby or if I got it from Home Depot, but they both sell these little square dowels. Well, it's not little, it's kind of thick actually. And all I'm doing for this part, which is a little tedious, is measuring it to size. So this way I can wrap it around the center to give us a little bit of contrast, add a little bit more of a high-end looking thing. I was trying to take these crafts up a notch to more of looking like a home decor piece you'd pick up somewhere in a store and pay a little bit more money for. I do want to me and these miter shears. So they did the job, but yeah. If you got a miter box, it might be a little bit easier than these with how thick this particular one was. And again, you can do this as thin or as thick as you want, but see me over here using the hot glue just for that quick bond in that one spot. The rest is all wood glue, so I know that these wood pieces are not going to come peeling off of here anytime soon. If you want to bust out a level to make sure that these are exactly in the precise spot as you go around, go right ahead. You know I like to wing things, so that's pretty much what I did here, and I adjusted with each turn. The piece is really universal, and you can honestly use it anywhere in your home to give it a little oomph. You're going to need to pick up 4 of these, and you're going to need to grab some type of stick. I'm using candlesticks. You could use whatever works for you. You're going to need to create like something for these palettes to sit on. These I picked up from Hobby Lobby for $3.99, and we're going to need some words. I'm choosing hope. You'll need, of course, as many candlesticks and palettes as big as your word is. And next thing you're going to want to do for this little decor piece is figure out which way you want your palette to face. You can have it go in horizontally or vertically. They both look different, and you can do different things with each design. So I wanted to share with you the different looks that these are giving me on top of these candlesticks, but I'm going to go with this one right here. I've been painting palettes for years at this point, and I've discovered there's 2 super easy ways to get in all those crevices. One, the technique we're going to use here, which is some water with a little bit of antique Waverly wax, and you could use paint as well if you don't want to use the antique Waverly wax. And 2, the spray paints. Now I'm trying to, you know, not put stuff on my face because that little mask bothers me, and I am also trying to minimize the amount of chemicals I'm breathing in lately, so I haven't been using a lot of spray paint. So this is the way we're going to go. Now usually I use this technique with a tin because it's bigger and I can submerge everything into the color, but I'm still lazy and I haven't got any tin, so we're using a bowl and we're rolling on with it. But truth be told, if you go to use the tin, make sure that you still have the brush, because you might need to take a little bit of extra color and just kind of smoosh it over to make the color a little bit more dominant. I really like the way the wood shows through with a light color, so it works wonderful for me, but just a little heads up. I'm keeping this project, well really most of them in the video, pretty neutral, and I wanted to add something special to each piece to kind of make them pop, so I decided to give these candlesticks a little bit of an ombre effect and have the bottom of them darker than the top. And then on the sides of these palette pieces, I made them a little bit darker than I did the whole piece of the palette, just so we had some darker edges on our piece. Again, this is just something preference, and honestly probably no one is going to notice it but me, but I just wanted to point that out to you. I did that I wanted to paint the words white, and of course here I'm like, where did this stain come from on my clean napkin? We're going to use this multi-surface paint in satin, and we're going to give these 2 coats. Next, we're going to take the little wood slice that you see me put down for our O, and of course, you know, I gotta decoupage that sucker. Here's our pretty napkin we're going to be using. I don't know why I decided to use this napkin. I kind of just wanted a bird on our O. I don't know. It just made sense to me at the time. So our bird napkin piece pops out. I just painted it white and I just ripped out what bird made sense for me at the time. If you've never decoupaged or ripped apart a napkin before, you want to make sure you get the extra sneaky layers off so you just have that decorative top piece. It's going to give you the best finish. Them extra layers are just going to prevent that decorative layer from actually sticking properly. There are a few easy ways you can get them sneaky layers off. One of my favorites is just to rip and then it'll reveal the sneaky layers and I pull them off. You can take a little bit of Mod Podge between two fingers or a piece of painter's tape and put them at the edge of the napkin opposite of each other and pull them apart. For our medium, we're just using some good old Mod Podge and I'm just doing the whole entire piece real quickly, lightly, because I like to say less is more whenever we're doing some napkin decoupage. It's real thin, real easy to rip. And even with this, I got a little bit nervous because I kind of just went over the whole piece and it's kind of a big little section of the napkin. And there was a little spot that I wanted to show you. If you look up at the top of this round, you're going to notice that the napkin is bubbling a little bit. I had too much Mod Podge underneath this. That's why I kind of stress the less is more with the Mod Podge. Even on something tiny like this, it's super easy to have bubbles. I did not care for the way the letters laid on the palette. They didn't really pop out to me. So I decided to cut down a piece of burlap and then cut a little square for each section so that way I could just glue them down and it helped the letters kind of pop out. I did decide to fray around the edges. Some fabric would look really nice behind here as well. Give it a little bit of extra oomph. I'm taking some tacky glue to get that burlap to stick, and I also use the tacky glue to get the wood letters to stick down on top. The burlap works out beautiful, and I'm telling you, it holds so good. It was really important for me to make sure that I was using glues that were going to give a long-lasting hold, because I do plan on selling these right in my vendor space. Wanted to make sure that they were gonna last, and I always get a little nervous if I'm just using hot glue with things. But by all means, use whatever glue works best for you. I really like tacky glue with fabric and wood. And right here, I'm just popping a little bit of sealer on top around, you know, make sure that napkin don't come peeling up later. And I'm attaching that also with some tacky glue. I want to make sure that these candlesticks don't go moving anywhere. So I'm taking some of my favorite wood glue and applying on most of the surface area of the top of the candlestick, and then a little smoosh of hot glue just to make sure that I get an immediate hold and these suckers don't go popping off, because that is such a pain in my booty when I am trying to use a long holding glue, but I don't get like an instantaneous hold. So hot glue does help provide that. Absolutely one of my favorite palette DIYs so far of this year. Let me know what you guys think. For these sconces, you're going to need 4 palette pieces. These ones, the large ones. Okay, 4 of these. And some colors. This is what I decided to go with. I wanted to, you know, keep it neutral, but add a little bit of color because I really haven't done a little bit of color in something in quite some time. I pushed these palettes together just so that way it would kind of be a little bit uniformed as I was going about spreading the paint around. And there's really no right or wrong way to go about this. Just switch up your colors. Try not to overlap them unless you want to actually blend the pieces, but we're going to dry brush over this. So I want each color to kind of pop through. If I blend it, they'll turn into a different color. So I want there to be like green, pink, and purple on here. I didn't want to have any mixtures. So I tried to make sure that they were each dry before I started the next color. I've used this technique many times, so feel free to add as many colors as you want on here. Once you get that dry brushing going, it's going to blend everything in really well. I kind of cheated a little bit and I brought in the heat gun instead of waiting for it to dry. and it only took a couple seconds. Now we're gonna bring in the Crusty Bit paintbrush mug. Let me know in the comments below, did this deserve its own entrance? I don't know, let me know. This cute little mug that I actually designed, it's in my merch line, and I have my Crusty Bit paintbrushes here, okay? And for all you in my comments that want to know why I don't just wash the brushes, why do I have so many crusty paintbrushes? Listen, life happens, okay? The paintbrushes are everywhere. I go from one room to the next. I got kids, I got the business, I got the house things. Listen, I am lucky. I even know that I have these Crusty Bit paintbrushes and they didn't fall into the abyss of craft supplies. I don't know where they're at, that I hid from myself somewhere. Okay, let's move on. Stop being so judgy. But people, here's why it's so great to know where your Crusty Bit paintbrushes are, because you can just dab them crusty edges and a little bit of paint, it doesn't matter what color, and then swoosh, swoosh, swoosh across your surface. I've used this on canvases before. As you can see here, it works wonderful on wood. And you just dry brush. It's super easy, and in a couple seconds, you're all done and have a gorgeous finish. Once these are all dry, you're going to need to bring in the miter shears. That's right. We're going to need to cut these suckers in half to create our sconces. There's a bunch of ways you could do this, just in case you have grip strength issues. You can wrap a towel around the edges of these miter shears. It's going to help you squeeze it a little bit better. Or you can take a pot holder and wrap around the edge of these little miter shears. It's going to help you squeeze them tight as well. I struggle with hand strength myself, so these are little tricks I use when I have to cut things and I struggle at times with the miter shears. Next, we're going to need to cut down 4 paint sticks to glue to our palettes. Side note, I went to grab the wood glue and I didn't have a lid on it. So I'm searching around this space. Oh, I don't even want to know how long that wood glue was sitting there without the lid, because it took me 2 days to film the project. So for all I know, I don't even listen. Okay, next. I cut down the paint sticks and use another paint stick to keep it even and mark that paint stick. So this way I made sure that I placed the paint sticks in the same exact spot as the first one. And then I attached a little bit, or put a little bit of wood glue and hot glue on the back of these for instant hold and a long hold, and then just spaced them out to what I felt made sense for the sconces. And I do want to say that I think if these were a solid black or a solid white, they would look really high-end looking. The colors kind of keeping that from happening, but I really wanted to just do something different here today. These are some little pieces I picked up from Hobby Lobby to create our hanger. And now we're going to need to bring in our drill with our little drill bit here so we can dangerously put a hole in the top of these suckers. I'm using a half drill bit, a 1/2-inch drill bit. I'm not sure how else I'm supposed to say that, spade, you know. And there is no easy way to go about this. So viewer beware. Attempt putting a hole in that sucker at your own risk, okay? You can grab all kinds of different hangers from the store. Ones that have little screws, you could just screw one here. You could glue different ones. I was just on a mission to use these ones that I picked up from Hobby Lobby. I literally picked them up for this project. And then I realized that they were too long, so I had to chomp at them with the miter shears and just kind of shave them down so that way they didn't protrude out so far from the back. And to get these to attach, I took some wood glue on the front, and as I pressed them through, I took hot glue on the back to hold them into place overnight and added a little hanger. For all the trouble, these turned out really cute. I do think if you want a high-end finish, do a solid color with the same exact concept. These would turn out super, super nice. For this wall decor set, we're going to need two of these garden dishes, and I'm going to paint it up white using DIY's Paint in the White Swan. I have a link down in the description box if you're interested in grabbing your own. Honestly, grab whatever paint you have that is going to stick to plastic. I have a strong faith in this stuff. You could use Regular chalk paint, if you got some Waverly laying around, or a nice multi-surface will do the trick. Just make sure it's gonna definitely stick to some plastic. I put 2 coats of paint on these little gems, and I did the front and the back just to make sure in case anybody looked around the side they didn't see shiny plastic. You know what I'm saying? Then I recently found these beauties at my local Dollar Tree. Well, not necessarily my local one. I gotta drive a little bit to that one. And I've definitely seen like the wall floral pieces, you know what I mean? But I don't recall seeing the ones with these gold trim bits. So I grabbed a couple. And just in case you're ever wondering where I pick up things, I do have a browsing channel called Browse with Brandy. I keep a link down in the description box if you ever want to hang out with me and see where I purchase some things or different deals that I get. I bring y'all along with me each week. It has been my experience that these little stickers slowly peel up after you attach them to things. So I waited a couple minutes and sure enough, they started peeling up off of our little dish here that we painted. I decided, let's grab some Mod Podge and slap it one down over top of this to ensure that our stickers are not going to come off of our dishes here. I'm going to be using a little foam brush, which is not something that I do very often, and I actually get comments about this. So I want to kind of share this little tip with you guys. See the foam? It will eventually, as you're dipping it in sealer and then smooshing it on a project, slowly but surely start to wear. And with that wear, that means just like with a paintbrush and you will get bristles and things, your sponge will fall apart. Only the sponge is harder to peel out of a sealer than just grabbing a piece of a bristle off of a brush. So I do not use these very often, and I also make sure that if I am going to use these, I don't use them with a poly. I just use them with some Mod Podge and on small projects just like this. I decided these pieces need a little something something, so I busted out my Dixie Belle Gold Gilding Wax and put a little bit on my finger and then smooshed it right around the rim. I used some little sticky pieces to attach these to the wall. You could certainly use some glue and attach little jute hangers on the back or whatever to be able to put these on your wall. I think these turn out absolutely stunning, and you would never know they came from the Dollar Tree. Let me share this experience with you. So we're going to start off with my typical bond adhesions, which is Titebond wood glue and hot glue. Make sure we don't overlap the two so they don't smoosh together and ruin the bond totally. Overlapping the two can completely cancel out your bond and be a pain in the booty. And if you've used hot glue to attach your tumbling blocks, and you know it smushes in there and it creates these crusty bits. I use these tools I purchased off Amazon to always get that out, because before I discovered the tools, it was tearing up my fingernails. Anyhow, you're here for the project. So you're going to need 8 tumbling blocks glued together in a row like this. You'll need two of them, okay? And then we're going to start, look, this goes back to not all tumbling blocks are created equal. Look at this. Look how uneven these joints are. Just toss that sucker right out of frame. Now we need to make sure that our tumbling blocks are even, because this matters for this project, okay? We don't want it lopsided. I wanted to do this project thicker, but I was low on tumbling blocks. Okay, I had 3 packs left, so you're getting a skinny project. But I'm giving you the inspiration, so you'll see where I'm going and what I mean exactly by making it bigger and thicker. I know a lot of other creators always use something to keep their blocks even. I do not. This is definitely my first time ever. I see the little piece of wood down here. I'm using to kind of press my pieces on there to make sure they're all lined up. And I did this to start out because my 8 pieces in a row, my 2 rows over there, they were not stable enough to press against. They weren't completely dry, so I wouldn't recommend using them right off the bat. And the reason why I say this project was such a pain is because getting the perfect amount of wood glue and hot glue on those tiny little pieces that are connecting to one another, oh, this took me about an hour just to put the center together. And then this joint was sticking to my contact paper. I was like, we're about to rip up my whole staging area. It was a mess. There were bits all stuck to it, hot glue, wood glue. It was something. I've made a lot of tumbling tower projects, and I don't think any of them made a mess like this and stuck to everything. There was also an abundant amount of little glue strings just dangling everywhere. We don't want them bits all over our stuff, so I had to clean that up, then get all the extra crusties out, and this happened. So now in my mind, I'm like, oh, this happened on camera. I recommend these tools. I'm like, I can't recommend them anymore. And then I'm like, I kind of still like them. We're just going to hot glue them suckers back together. That's what I did, and it's working just fine. But in my defense, the set's only like $6, and it's lasted quite some time before it fell apart. And I just glued it back together, and we're good to go. So anyhow, okay, back to the project again. I alternated the wood glue and the hot glue at the ends here. I didn't show it to start, but I am here so you can see how I attached all these pieces, and I let this thin dry for a full 24 hours. We are going to be attaching stuff onto this, and it's going to be hanging on the wall, and if you're using just hot glue, prepare yourself, it's going to fall apart. No disrespect to the hot glue lovers here, but you're watching me because you want me to be real with you, right? You want this to stay together. Put some wood glue on it, all right? Now, if you're just doing it for crafter's sake, don't sweat it, but otherwise, wood glue it. And we're going to use Waverly's white chalk paint to paint it. I know, I saved you the painting. Calm down, I know you're excited. We're going to need some things. We're going to need this palette box I recently found in a Dollar Tree browsing video. I'm super flippin' excited about these, but anyhow, and then we're going to need a knob or a hook or a hanger of any kind. I'm using this old beat up thing from a flip I did some months back. And here I'm just kind of waving this in the camera so you see what I'm about to use to create a little accent piece for our Dollar Tree tumbling block pegboard. That's what we're making. Now I'm super cheap and I like to reuse whatever, and I know I can reuse this twine to go on top of our other little accent piece, so I'm just cutting the ends off. And I'm not going to make you watch me paint, but whenever I'm about to decoupage anything, I put a light layer of white paint on it if it's going to help the light colored napkin shine through. And I'm going to use this timeless gray to create a faux frame around this, because we're going to create like a shadow boxed piece without using a real frame. We're kind of creating our own frame. Now, I've made many DIYs with these tumbling blocks, and I've had plenty of people comment about how do you keep the pieces. They look all gunky sometimes when they create them. Here is a little tip. Now, there's a few ways to go about this, people, and I've showed you some with some joint compound and some texturing. Here's another one. You can just distress the piece. Get you some paint, make sure your paintbrush is fairly dry, and then go over it lightly, and it will hide all those pile ups and gunk ups and just look like one solid piece. And here is the beautiful napkin we are going to be using to create our accent pieces onto our pegboard. Show you exactly how big I wanted to make this pegboard. I actually wanted it to have about 7 rows going. You see how I'm holding it like that? So it could really be on your wall, and you could use hooks and hangers and little wire pieces to really just kind of hang whatever type of shelving, put florals in there, whatever. I just wanted to inspire you. This way you could use it in any room of your house for anything. Now, if you've never decoupaged with napkins before, there are several layers of a napkin, and you want to get down to your last layer. I like to leave them ripped mostly, but for this one in particular, it's going inside of our faux shadow box, and I'm just cutting it to size. And then I'm going to use Mod Podge to attach it on the inside. I like to use 4 napkins, that is. I like to use very thin layers with the napkins, with the decoupage, and see how I'm just scooping that extra out there. I personally feel like the more Mod Podge we're tossing in there, the clumpier your napkin is and the easier it is for, you know, you to rip. But you do you want to use 10 piles of Mod Podge, you know, power to you. I will not judge you. And in case you didn't know, I also have a decoupage tips and tricks, you know, video, hints, whatever you want to call it, and you're welcome to check that out. I'll put that in the description box. On a little side note, people, the DIYer in me went and got a drill and a drill bit. I was going to drill a hole in this instead of just using the hole puncher on this piece of paper-ish box, paper mache box. Also, I recently asked in a video little tips or tricks that people use to easily get twine or rope through a hole, because I usually take a piece of painter's tape and pull it through, and this was recommended to glue the end together. Now, of course, make sure it's cooled off and then put it through the hole. And I love this. You guys rock. All used to put this little gem in the comments. I love you. Look at that. It's magnificent. Now getting back to the idea of using one napkin to, do an entire piece and just kind of make it look cohesive. I'm using the bottom part of this napkin on our little basket that we are going to hang off of our pegboard. And this way, if I want to switch out the two pieces, the little accented decor pieces, I can and change it up, or I can make matching pieces that go along the whole thing. And I just really love this. I want to hear what you think about this. We are going to dupe this beautiful high-end piece I found on Pinterest for under $5. First, we're going to need one of these little gems from Dollar Tree, some PVC pipe, and a couple little connector pieces. This is going to create the little faux faucet that we're going to put inside this piece. And don't worry, they're extremely inexpensive. You can grab these from Home Depot. There's a little stand right in the plumbing area where they have all the PVC connectors and pipes. You can grab a 2-foot piece for $1.74 or whatever size you want. I grabbed this size, and then make sure you grab the right little connector piece. I picked up these, they were 67 cents each, and I grabbed 2 of them. For legs, I'm choosing to use these tiny little snowman pieces I pick up around Christmas at Dollar Tree. Whatever paint you choose to use, make sure it works well with galvanized metal. I'm gonna use DIY's paint, and I keep a link down in the description box below if you're ever interested. Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Designs keeps it. Other options would be a chalk paint or a multi-surface paint, or you could even do a nice clear coat spray paint over this and then paint it with another paint to give you a good adhesive start. Another option that I really like to use and I have easy access to is Waverly. I'm going to use this for the pipe piece, and with both paints I only had to do 2 coats. I like using a pouncer whenever I'm working on something that isn't wood. I feel like the paint grabs better than using a paintbrush. To each their own. This is what just works best for me, but I love how amazing chalk paints or the clay-based chalk DIY paint covers, and you don't have to spend so much time painting. You just have to wait for the dreaded drying time. I also painted the legs black so it matched the Pinterest piece, and then took a couple minutes with the little sponge that had some black on it and just distressed around. I had to take the sander though to sand off the sections where the words were so they pop through. I was thinking about painting over it, and then I'm like, I'm scared this might look messy. Honestly, it took me a couple seconds to sand it down enough that the black print on those words popped through. Since they were raised just a little bit, it worked out fine. Make sure you get all that dust off there, especially if you're going to seal over this. I used some tacky glue and hot glue to attach the legs and our PVC pipe piece. You could use E6000 and Gorilla Glue gel along with some hot glue to get that instant hold, and then you have that long lasting hold with the other glues. I added a little extra hot glue behind our faux faucet just to make sure that it didn't fall over, and let this completely dry overnight. I did use my miter saw to cut down the PVC pipe. You could absolutely use a miter box. I've done that before, and I just swung the sizes, my friends. So use your eye and make some judgment according to what you think will look best in your faucet. I have to say, this is probably my favorite Pinterest piece I have ever duped. Kudos to the original maker. We are going to create a faux balloon centerpiece for this DIY. We're going to need to set these dishes right on top of each other, just like this. When I delivered my daughter, one of my best friends gave me this little balloon that said, "It's a girl in a vase." I decided to take to the internet to see if I could show you exactly what I'm talking about, and unfortunately, these were the closest that I could find, but the actual piece she gave me, the balloon is attached to the vase. So we're going to roll on with this and attach our two garden dishes together just like this. Now you're going to need some patience, my friends, because getting them exactly on top of each other is going to be key for this to actually work. And I promise you, you can do it. I did it. I put a little bit of tacky glue all around the edge first to start. I then placed them gingerly together and then took my heat gun, dried it just a little bit, and then took more of the tacky glue around the edge and started using my finger to spread it. And I did really thin layers. And I did that because the thicker the layer, the longer it takes to dry. And this stuff actually adheres fairly quickly if you do thin layers. I let this dry for a couple hours and then grab some of DIY's paints in the white swan color and put one thin coat on here. It doesn't have to be perfect. We are decoupaging this and we just need a background so our design pops and our Mod Podge sticks. We are going to be using one of my new releases called A Period in Time from my TDS Decoupage line. I wanted to go hard steampunk on this design, mostly because of the base that we're going to be using. I can't wait to share that with you. This design came out super beautiful. There are tons of papers to check out if you're interested. They're at thediystruggle.com. Links are down in the description box. And do not feel like you have to use this decoupage paper at all. I even think this would be an awesome idea for a wedding or a birthday party. You could take pictures, have them blown up and printed out on paper and decoupaged onto your own faux balloon as a centerpiece and add whatever florals or vase that you want to pop them on into. For the video, I want it to go hard steampunk and I hope you guys enjoy the idea. To tear our paper, we're going to grab a paintbrush, use whatever you want. If you want to use your hands, feel free. I'm adding a little bit of water to this joint and giving our balloon some girth, okay, giving a little wide berth over here, so this way we have some extra to wrap around. We want it to come as close to the center on each side as possible, and I'm going to trace out two designs, one for the front, one for the back, so this way no matter what way I'm setting it, we will see a beautiful design. And any gaps, we're gonna pop some Antique Waverly wax in there. I'm gonna share that with you in just a minute. So all my brandy, I can't do that. I'm coming for you, okay? Listen, you got this. I'm gonna show you how to fill in the gaps, all the things, okay? You ready? Let's get started. I'm busting out the Mod Podge for this. Use whatever medium you wanna use. I'm also gonna be using a sponge and a little bit of water on a spray bottle, or in a spray bottle, a little spritzy. Okay, to apply, I'm using some Mod Podge brushes. These are down in my Amazon affiliate link in the description box for anyone that's interested. And I'm putting a thin layer on and spraying the back of our paper. Just a little bit. I'm not saturating it. We don't want to tear the paper, okay? And then I'm just taking my fingers to press it down to make sure everything is on here and as non-wrinkled up. Honestly, I wasn't worried about if it had some wrinkles in there, but you know, balloons kind of have them around the edges anyway. But I was very patient with this, took my time. And people, if you're new to this and you think it's supposed to go smoothly, this balloon took me about 2 hours to make. This is my happy place and I love to decoupage, but people, believe me when I say crafts piss me off too sometimes, depending on what I'm doing. Just walk away and come back, okay? Especially if you're learning doing this, it can be extremely tedious. Do not feel discouraged. Also, this sponge I'm using, it is a dry sponge. It is not wet. I get asked that all the time if I'm using a wet or a dry sponge. It's dry. It helps to just press things down, kind of like some cling wrap, and I don't have to worry about this getting saturated or anything like that. Sometimes my cling wrap gets a little crusty musty too quickly. Sponges work well for me. If you're not familiar with them, not a big deal. Use whatever works best for you to flatten your paper that you're trying to decoupage. When that side was dry, I then came back in with a little bit of water and another paintbrush and just trimmed around the excess. You could leave this and then kind of fold each piece over as you go. It's not a big deal. This is just how I chose to create this piece. Then I applied the same method on the other side with the other paper that I trimmed out. When you get to the point where you have both sides applied, let it dry and then come in with some little bits of paper and just fill in the gaps. Try not to overlay them too much so they just kind of meet up in the creases. And then once this dries, you're going to come back in with some antique Waverly wax. You can put that on a little brush. I just applied some on a sponge here and I just tapped all over the extra little gaps. And I even put some on top of our paper, so this way everything just blended in together. I have this little antique vintage cup that this thing looks perfect in, and at the time I was like, I knew it was going to be perfect, but I wasn't sure how perfect. And I took this floral foam, cut it down to size, and then cut like a V in the top of the floral foam. So once I put my tacky glue on here, I knew that our balloon was going to stick perfectly inside this V. Now it's a little heavy, okay? It's a little top heavy, so you know, it might tip, but it's on here and I'm happy with it. I added some extra little bits. Obviously, use whatever vase you want, use whatever florals you want, and ta-da! This picture I got off Pinterest is a little dim, so please mind it. It was the brightest I could get it. However, you can still see how stunning this piece is, and I thought we could recreate it using the Dollar Tree frames. These are absolutely beautiful and have gorgeous details in them. Believe it or not, it's a chalkboard, and you can obviously use it to DIY however you want. The backs pop off very easily. There is no glass inside of it. So it's kind of a win-win, especially because sometimes that glass can be a little scary to mess with. In a previous video, I shared how to get the sheen off of the chalkboard aspect and decoupage it. And I had so many people like, why didn't you just use the back? Can't share too many tips without getting somebody's "it must be done this way" feathers ruffled. So today we're going to do the back. Use whatever colors you want to remix this into home decor that works for you. I'm just using white here for the base and the frame, which I actually painted off camera because it's a little tedious trying to get in all those little grooves, and took some gold gilding wax to add some highlights where those designs really pop up and are raised. There are several ways you could go about recreating the center. I decided to take this little ornate laser cut that I had sitting in my stash. I think I grabbed this from Hobby Lobby, and applying some of the same gilding wax I put on the outside right to the frame, so this way it just all matched. I really love the little ornate design of this piece, and now came the fun part. I had already taken some napkins. I did not like any of the designs that I had on my napkins for this, so I grabbed some of my TDS Decoupage paper and started taking this and just fitting it over little sections. If you're not familiar with me, I have a decoupage paper brand called TDS Decoupage Paper. I do keep links down in the description if you're ever interested. I did decide to go with a design that is on this particular paper. This one is called Les Oilettes. It's French, which just means carnations. We're going to take some Mod Podge as our medium and attach this tiny little section that I cut out of this paper. And yes, I know it is a tiny piece. Brandy, why didn't you just slap some Mod Podge on the whole thing and slap the paper down? I don't know why. Probably force of habit of me just going section by section and knowing that this works for me. So, you know, my subconscious is just leading the way here. I plopped a little bit of glue around this and attached our little laser cutout, and how stunning did this turn out? This book riser I found on Pinterest could be put in so many different places in your home, and it's also extremely inexpensive DIY because Dollar Tree has a huge section of books that come in all different kinds of sizes. For this particular piece, I knew I wanted a hardback, so this way once I glued the entire book together, whatever I put on top of here, I knew it was going to be extremely sturdy. I removed the cover because I knew we were not going to need that sucker, and then grabbed my DIY paint to give this a nice white base. If you're interested, I get my DIY paint from Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Designs. I keep a link down in my description box. For the decoupage portion, I busted out my Les Oilettes design from my TDS Decoupage Paper and went with this piece, or this little section right here. I grabbed a little paintbrush and put some water on it, so this way I could get a very exact detailed trim around the paper without destroying any of the other designs. And people, this goes without saying, I always want you to know that you can use whatever paper you want. Don't feel like you have to use the TDS decoupage paper or the same exact napkins that I'm using. Take the ideas, get the inspiration, and remix them into whatever works for your home and your decor. For our medium, I'm just busting out the Mod Podge. I'm keeping it really simple here, and I'm placing the paper in the center. You will notice that I trimmed enough of the paper out to leave a little bit of a white edge, and that was planned because I want the design to go directly in the center of our book so it looks like a book for real. And I'm going to show you how to blend the edges in just a second. For this piece, I decided to just go little by little with the book. I wanted to ensure that the design was on here really well, and I didn't have a whole lot of wrinkles. Obviously, use whatever method works best for you. If you want to do the iron one, you go right ahead. I did not have a lot of time to sit and wait for this to dry, so I went section by section, which is one of my favorite ways. It also ensures minimal wrinkles, and I just use my thumb to smooth it out and my fingers, which is also another great reason to work with these papers, is it allows you to just apply some pressure to your fingertips and things turn out really smooth. For the crease part, I just took my time, pushed my thumb in there, and went all the way across the book. Once I ensured that that paper was completely in that crease, I took more Mod Podge and went around the spine of the book and wrapped our design around the sides, which is why I actually wanted to use this design, because it was large enough that it wrapped around the spine and it didn't leave it empty, so I had to create another look or another design on the spine itself. There's nothing wrong with that, it's just the way that I wanted to do the book. If you want to have an extremely seamless look between whatever you're decoupaging and your paint, you need to make sure the ends of that decoupage paper are flawless and extremely flat to whatever your surface is. I like to use a fan brush for this. I'm currently out of them, so I'm just using this little brush and butting it up all around the edges with our medium, and then taking my finger and really pressing everything down. Make sure you let this step completely dry. If you want to attach your book pages, using Mod Podge over them once you've put some hot glue and tacky glue inside the book is a great way to ensure that the pages don't start coming apart. You will need to do this step a few times. As you can see here, now that this is dry, there's a definite division between the paint and the paper. I do not like that. I like to come in with either a chalk paint or the DIY clay-based paint that I'm using right here. I put a little bit in a spot and then pull it off with my finger. You might be asking to yourself, Brandy, why are we doing that? Because if I just do it like this and go over the edge, you can see that there is a line of paint. There's still disconnect. Taking your finger and swiping it actually pulls the paint and it blends in your piece. It's just a little trick that I learned, and I like to share this with people. It just helps that decoupage art really blend into whatever the surface is. You can take some of the paint like I am here and just tappity tap 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 and smoosh 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 a little around on the decoupage paper. This just really helps everything blend together so you can't tell where one ends, the other one starts, and that's why also picking the background paint helps. If you make sure it matches your paper, you won't be able to tell where one begins and one ends. For some legs, we're going to just use these wood snowmen from Dollar Tree, tacky glue, and some hot glue, and pop right on the corners. Feel free to seal over your book in about 24 hours after you've created it, allowing things to dry, and your riser is all set. Watcha! Sorry. I can't help it. It's so much fun. On a serious note, this particular design is what inspired me to want to DIY with these folding fans. I really thought it was beautiful, and I had an idea that just popped to mind as soon as I seen it when I was messing with them. We're gonna take this square down, and you can create this look with whatever way it makes sense for you. I knew that this was going to be long enough to keep the span of the fan open, so our design is displayed at all times. Want to create a floral wall decor piece with this, so I'm going to just put this square dowel in the center of this and make sure that it's even across the board to where we can apply some glue onto plastic sections of the fold. People, as you're doing this, you're going to want to make sure that you hold that stick in place and allow the hot glue to dry for as long as it takes, my friends. And I say this because anytime I noticed that I was starting to let up pressure, that it was instantly starting to close, and the little pieces of plastic that had the hot glue, it was just folding under those sections in the center here. Once it was completely dry, off camera, I go back and apply a nice thick layer around and a little bit of tacky glue in the center where all the little plastic pieces meet. Once that side was dry, I grabbed a little piece of floral foam. We are going to glue this sucker right to the center of the plastic on the front of our fan here. Now you can put this wherever you want. I decided to put it in this section mostly because I wanted to leave that little gold bit that our faith, all the faith that we have this fan is sticking together, leave that alone. And if you want to come back and put a tassel on that or add anything hanging off of that, you can. We're going to take some florals and stick in our floral foam. And I know these look peach on film, but I'm telling you, they were pink when I purchased them. Next time you're in Dollar Tree, people, check out their vinyl section. They're now carrying frosted window film. They have a few different designs. I was lucky enough to pick up 2 at my local Dollar Tree, and for $1.25, you're getting a lot. Sometimes I'm lucky enough to find glass decor plates for a couple cents at the thrift stores. But if I can't, Dollar Tree always has these for $1.25, and glass plates can make beautiful home decor. I cut me down a little sliver, just big enough to fit over the back of this plate here, and I'm taking a little orange colored pencil just to trace around where the center circle is of the plate. Obviously, you do this however works best for you. For me, I felt like just flipping over our vinyl piece, since the backing is easy to write on, it would make the most sense for me to draw on here and then cut out the extra so it fit perfectly right in the center here. It's super easy to remove from the backing, and don't worry if you cut this a little bit too big. I'm going to show you how to fix that and trim it up. Now, if you cut it too short, you're going to have to just make a whole new piece. I'm sorry, I can't help you any further than that. For the application here, you're going to notice that I'm grabbing a little Cricut tool. And that's because as I was messing with this film, making this video, I realized that if I was just using my fingers, the film, it was just coming right off. In an effort to save you the struggling at home using this to DIY with, please grab yourself something to actually scrape the back of the film for whatever you're applying this to. I could tell you it's easy, it's wonderful, it's beautiful, carry on with my video, get some views, but that's not going to benefit you. The directions on the box do recommend spraying a little bit of water on the glass surface, which is completely typical for using a film on a window if you've never done this before. But through trial and error, I found that using a little scraper tool on wood, plastic, or glass, it actually helped it stick pretty good without water. For this little bit of excess, I grabbed my X-Acto knife and just gingerly cut along the circle. This stuff trimmed super easy. Just be careful with your fingers, especially if you're doing it around something like this. It can be a little scary. I'm a huge fan of frosted glass. This is kind of a game changer for me. Absolutely love how this turned out. And it's super easy to add things to. You can take Dollar Tree wall decals, you can grab some transfers, plop them in the center, do a stencil. I've definitely done stencils before, even decoupage a design on the center, and you have a beautiful high-end looking home decor piece. How stunning are these mismatched ornate frames I found on Pinterest? I love that the Dollar Tree candlestick holder ties them both together for a gorgeous high-end decor piece. Obviously, we're going to need a Dollar Tree candlestick holder for this and an ornate frame. Dollar Tree has these beautiful pieces. They're little chalk boards, and I love to use them for all kinds of things. I just love the design. And they also have an oval one, but for this dupe, we're just gonna do one. For our paint color, I'm just gonna use this DIY paint in the White Swan. I'm using a pouncer to apply the paint on the candlestick, and I'm gonna do the same exact thing on our little frame. Pouncers are really good to be able to smoosh everything in those little raised sections, so this way you can get in the crevices. Paintbrush, you gotta swirl and get in there, and it can take a lot of time. I've spent some serious time painting these frames, and a pouncer is the quickest. If you want to use the chalk side of your piece, give it a light sand just to knock the sheen off, and then apply 2 coats of chalk paint to prep for your decoupage. Or just flip the piece over, use the back, and apply 1 coat of chalk paint to prep for the decoupage, and avoid the sanding altogether. For the decoupage portion, we're going to be using this TDS print from my decoupage paper line to cut a little section out to put on our piece. And people, you don't have to use this paper to create your own decoupage. Use whatever works for you. I'm going to use Mod Podge as our medium and create an iron-on look. So I'm going to apply this with a fan brush and let the Mod Podge sit on here. So this way we get a really flawless finish. And I know what you're thinking, Brandy, how long do we let it sit? And that really depends on how much Mod Podge you're putting on. It could be 30 minutes, it could be 2 hours. Now it's time to bring in the iron. You can use whatever iron you want. I always have this little sucker sitting next to me, and I click the little 3 buttons and then just let it heat up. It usually takes a couple minutes and we're good to go. And while we're waiting for that to heat up, I wanted to hurry up and put some paint on this little wood sliver that we're going to add to the top of our candle holder for some extra support for the frame. Now that everything's dry, it's time to bring in the parchment paper. Oh, look at me remembering. I remembered the parchment paper. I love in the comments when people are like, did you really forget to use parchment paper when you're doing the iron one? Well, not today. Look at that. It's always a good idea to just rub your hand gently over the surface that you Mod Podge, making sure everything's dry before you start to iron on your paper. Now, my friends, future me wants to bring to your attention how I'm placing this paper on here. And then as I go to create the actual piece, Let me know in the comments below if you catch it before I bring it to your attention what I'm doing wrong. In case you're wondering what the parchment paper is for, it actually serves as like a protective barrier for your paper, as well as if there is some Mod Podge sticking around anything, it's not going to cause any sticking to the iron. It will adhere to the parchment paper and protect your design and the iron itself. It really just makes everything attach a little bit more flawless. I wing things very often and forget to use the parchment paper, and as long as I'm careful, I don't have issues, but I've definitely mucked up before. When I'm all done, I like to make sure the edges are attached just like this. As long as they're on to the end, I then grab a little bit of sandpaper and I will pull the sandpaper down, which usually causes it to detach very easily from whatever it's decoupaged onto. And if you're new to decoupage or just want some more inspiration, if you click the more button underneath this video, it will open up my description box and provide a whole bunch of links. There's a playlist down there with tons of decoupage information and how-tos. This turned out so pretty. I wish I got to use it. Moving on to attaching everything together, I'm taking some tacky glue and some hot glue so we can put our little circle piece right on here. This is just going to give us more of a brace to add the frame. And now I'm going to take the frame that is all dry and put that right on top of the tacky glue and the hot glue I'm adding on here. And it was at this moment I knew I mucked up. Can you see what I'm doing wrong? Pause it real quick and let me know in the comments. Now, I've done a lot of goofy things over the years of creating content and making DIYs and decoupaging things, but this has got to be the first that I have decoupaged something completely sideways. What do y'all think? You think it's good? Think it's good? I'm gonna have to fix this. I did want to share with you real quick that a good way to bring out some of the ornate designs on the frame is to take a little bit of gilding wax, or you could take any paint color and dry brush over the raised designs. You can even do the same thing on the candle holder since it has some little sharp sections, just to kind of add in some high-end details. I think this turned out so beautiful, even though I had to pick a completely different design to pop in here, so this way it was facing the correct way. One more time for the people who skipped in the front. Just kidding. This beautiful pattern reminds me of that blue willow china pattern, and I thought these would look stunning as a large wall decor piece. We're going to need 2 of these for this particular project, and we're going to need a brace. For that, I'm going to take this Dollar Tree wood plank and use it to attach both of our fans to. Use whatever you want as your brace. I wanted something large and heavy, so this way I could put a bracket on the back of it as well and not have to have any weight applied on both of the fans since they're so thin and fragile. I'm gonna take this white multi-surface paint and just paint the very center of this plank, because that's what's possibly going to show through both of the fans. I didn't do the whole thing. You can do the whole thing if you want. I just needed to make sure that the center, if it was able to be seen, it matched everything cohesively. I'm taking this tacky glue to help me attach this floral mesh that I have from Dollar Tree. I'm gonna put this right in the center where we put our paints, and I'm not going to do it any particular way. I'm going to just flop it right over its own pattern all along the center, overlapping it with the tacky glue and the hot glue to ensure that we have a long lasting hold and a quick immediate hold. And make sure whatever you're using to help you apply this protects your little finger bits. When you're happy with how you have your mesh spread out, and if you don't want to use this mesh, use ribbon, or don't use anything, just use the paint. I thought it would just be a nice addition because we're going to apply some florals in here as well. I'm adding some glue to make sure that we keep our fan spread completely open, so this way our design is displayed extremely well, showing the fan from point to point. I held everything in place for a minute or so to make sure it was all attached, and then flipped this completely upside down. When I went to attach the second fan completely opposite of the first one, I noticed there was some gaps. So I grabbed some more of that mesh and started putting it in there. So this way there was no spaces from the paint, the mesh, and then both of our folding fans. Once I had that all down, I then took the other fan and glued that down the same exact way that I glued the first one. This piece is pretty big, and I feel like the idea itself could be remixed into so many different things. You could absolutely take a welcome sign and put it in the center, use some of that floral foam, and put some decorative pieces over it to hide the floral foam. You could pop a mirror in the center of here as long as you have the correct brackets to hold everything in place and the right glue. I decided to take some bright floral colors and pop in here. I feel like oranges and yellows go really well with this color blue. And then add a pretty metal floral right in the center. You are not going to look at Dollar Tree trays the same way after this project. I personally already feel like these items that you can pick up from Dollar Tree already look like they cost more than $1.25, and you can get them in various different colors and styles. So taking this Dollar Tree frosted window film and adding to the center for a little something something can't hurt, right? Especially if we just keep it the same exact color. I mean, by all means, people, paint yours up if you want. You know what I'm saying? I like the gold. So we're just going to take the film, place it in the center here, and then grab our scissors, give a little snip in the corner, and then just follow the line all the way down to the other end. And the hope is that it fits perfectly right on in here. And worst case scenario is you trim it too short and then you gotta cut a whole new piece. But if you got some overhang, just grab your X-Acto knife and trim off the excess. Make sure that as you're applying, you keep that backing on there to stop your paper from sticking to itself or anything else. And you grab yourself a little scraper. This is just going to make sure that it sticks so much better to whatever you're applying your film onto. I would absolutely recommend using a little bit of Mod Podge around the edge on a project like this, just to ensure that your film is not going to be popping off later. Especially use a waterproof one if you're going to be putting it in an area that it's going to get a little bit of water over top of it. Absolutely love how the gold one turned out, but even more so, I really like this silver one. What do you guys think? Remix this idea using any size frames and any kind of frames you would like. I am taking these Dollar Tree 5x7s and removing the glass piece so we can attach the Dollar Tree frosted window film right onto them. And people, be careful because these Dollar Tree glass pieces are a little fragile, okay? If you've never worked with them before, be careful. I'm using a color pencil to trace on the back of the frosted window film the size that we need to cut out to fit on the piece of glass. It is really important to use a scraping tool whenever you're applying this to make sure that it adheres really well and that this film isn't going to come back off. However, you want to be extremely ginger doing that with these Dollar Tree glass frame pieces because the glass I have broken at least a dozen or more of these just by staring at them. Sorry. But look how pretty these turned out. So pretty. And you can obviously do this to as many frames as you would like and create as many different types of wall decor pieces in your home. Love this idea. For the design, I'm using these little anchor glass stickers that Dollar Tree carries. Obviously, use whatever you want to put in the center. Want it to keep it white to match with the frame. And you can plop colors in here. You could use a stencil for this. You could use a little decoupage paper or a napkin to put in the center here. Whatever design that you would like to stand out and be your focal point of your decor piece. Just wanted to use the anchors today, and I feel like these turned out so high-end looking. If you want to hang them on the wall, make sure that you add a little hanger in the back. I did take some tacky glue to the corners and around with a paintbrush, so this way once I sat the frame in here, we wouldn't have the tiny little black hooks popping around the corner holding onto the glass, that they would just be kind of sitting in here with some glue. I ensured the hold with a little bit of hot glue as well, and I chose to stage these up like some tabletop decor. These hurricane vases you can grab from Dollar Tree are probably one of the most versatile pieces of glass that you can grab from there and turn them really into anything, especially a high-end decor piece, which is exactly what we're going to do using this Dollar Tree frosted window film. It's easy enough to measure around the glass and cut it down to size. And then any trimming you have to do, you can do with an X-Acto knife after, which you'll see me share with you at the end. I made sure where the film met around our little hurricane vase that there was a smidge of an overhang, not a whole lot. And as I was applying the film, I kept the backing on the excess that wasn't attached to our hurricane vase. So this way, the film didn't start attaching to anything else. And I'm about to be 100% real with y'all. This was my second take on this vase because my first take, I decided to pull the backing off and then just apply it with my hands instead of using this little scraper, and guess what? It didn't stick. Even though the directions on the box recommend using water, I found that just using the scraping tool will help this film stick really well to what you're applying it to. Just be mindful of the pressure that you're using with whatever surface you're attaching it to so you don't break anything. And just a heads up, while the footage may fool you into thinking this is super easy and it took me a couple minutes, it took me over 20 minutes to actually apply the film, making sure there were no bubbles and that this was attached on here really well. I took my X-Acto knife to the inner rim of the top of this hurricane jar. Vase, it's a vase. I keep saying jar and then editing it back out just to let y'all know what's going on behind the scenes here. I'm cracking up at myself. I'm like, stop it, Brandy. If I had $1 for every time I had to edit out hurricane jar in this section of the video, I'd be rich. Anyhow, we're just gonna roll on with the rest of this DIY because we are basically done. If you want to add a little bit of Mod Podge around the edges and where the seam meets, you go right ahead. That's just going to ensure that this is going to stick on here all that much better. I love how this turned out. It is so beautiful. Several of these large cutting boards at Dollar Tree. They were only $3. They look amazing on their own, but we're going to decoupage this one in a very unique way. Normally, I'd paint over this gem and call it a day, but we're going to actually sand off the design. That's right. This is going to just sand right on off of here. It's going to take a little bit of elbow grease, and it started making a bit of a mess. So, you know, I retreated to the patio. And just in case you're wondering, I'm using 120 grit. The lower grit on the sandpaper, the more coarse it is. The higher grit, the smoother it is. The more coarse it is, gives you the ability to really knock off any print like this. And people, since it was 120 grit, this was a little rough, you know what I'm saying? But I had to be careful because guess what? This is not solid wood. It's MDF, okay? Check out the back, all right? This is a huge indicator, not solid wood, just the top. So if we would have sanded it down too far, we wouldn't have that beautiful wood on there. And now to make it nice and smooth, I'm going to take this 800 grit sandpaper and just wrap it around my little finger sander. And we're going to go over this to make it smooth like butter for us to make a brand new DIY out of. We are finally at the good part. Sometimes prepping is like such a pain in the booty. Oh, look at that. I forgot something. And of course, I continue to forget that Dollar Tree has been stepping up their game with attaching things. So here I am, because they have put these staples in this sucker, trying to pry the twine off of here by any means necessary. Those suckers were in there. But in all seriousness, it's a good thing that they're, you know, putting their stuff together better. Here is one of the beautiful napkins that we're going to be using to decoupage onto this piece. And one thing I really love about this napkin is each square has a different design on the background. It's like the same front background, you feel me? But the back has a different design. And since I'm asked constantly about layering and matching napkins, this is the second napkin we're going to use on here. We're going to tear both of these apart, put them together on our beautiful cutting board. And this napkin has the same exact design on 4 squares. To get us started, we are going to tear a little corner here to reveal the sneaky layers and rip them suckers right on off, so we just have our top decorative layer. And then we are going to use a little bit of water on a paintbrush to really give us a nice specific design. You can tear your napkin. I love doing that as well. But whenever you're doing details and you're using things like tissue paper or a napkin, since they're super thin, water can help guide you to get a precise design. Just make sure when you're using a napkin specifically, you wait for the ends to dry, that you have water on. If you do not, while you're trying to apply that with the Mod Podge or whatever you're using as your medium, it's possible that sucker is going to rip or cause issues. So, you know, wait 10-15 minutes, make sure all your little edges are dry from the water. To apply our napkins, we're going to use some cling wrap, and this is just the Great Value brand. It's a knockoff. It isn't even the actual name brand. And we're going to be using some sponges. I use these all the time and get asked all the time, what sponges do I use? These exact ones. And we don't even need a whole sponge, because it's been my experience that if I use the whole sponge, it actually gets in the way. So I'll cut them in half and just use half the sponge. And people, a little tip, after about 7 to 10 uses, this is going to get a little crusty musty. I will cut these up so I can use them for stencils and textured effects. Just a little tip, you know, waste not, want not. And we are going to be using some Mod Podge and fan brush to apply our napkin. It's my favorite thing to actually use as an applicator whenever I'm doing napkin decoupage DIYs. There are a lot of ways you can create decoupage art, and as a crafter, a DIYer, or an artist, I like to believe that we all find what works for us through one means or another, whether it's school, a knack for it, YouTube. And really, I truly believe that there's no right or wrong way to go about it. Just create something that you love, and as long as it makes you happy, that's all that matters. It doesn't have to be perfect. Whenever it comes to decoupage, I like to believe less is more, because napkins are super easy to destroy. Super easy. So usually I will place my napkin down in one section, and I'll either start at the top, the bottom, the side, the middle, whatever works for me at that time, depending on the project. And I will go little by little, section by section, applying a small amount of Mod Podge, using my sponge to press it down, because the Mod Podge seeps up through the napkin. The sponge, since it's dry, it's grabbing that, and then you can take your cling wrap and go over it, smoothing it out. And before I get the iron-on method people of the world talking about how that is the best way to get the most wrinkle-free application, you are so right. It absolutely is. But I talk about this a lot in my content. Doing it this way is quickest for me because I have to make content for you. The iron-on method requires drying and waiting and waiting. With this, since I'm applying such a thin layer, it dries really quickly and I can continue making whatever I'm DIYing. There are a couple ways you can go about layering napkins. For this particular project, I really wanted that cascade of hydrangeas that is going upwards to kind of meet right underneath of our little yellow Tweety bird that we have up here. So I just took some more water on a little paintbrush and just kind of trimmed it in such a way that it blended together. Now you might be asking yourself, Brandy, why didn't you just paint the background and then apply your napkins? Well, there's a couple ways you can, like I said, decoupage, and I wanted the wood background to kind of blend into the napkins to make these look like they just went on the board. And keep in mind, whenever you're decoupaging a napkin or tissue paper and it's really thin, you can see whatever the background is. It'll be fairly translucent. So if you pick the color of your background that is sort of similar to your wood grain, it'll look really flawless. And this goes without saying that if you iron it on, it's going to be even more flawless. Okay. Once I was happy with the application of the napkins, I decided to take some more cling wrap and just kind of go over. There were some little sections where I got a little extra with the Mod Podge and really just wanted to kind of smoosh it out. And the cling wrap helps accomplish that. I let this dry for about 20 to 30 minutes, but if I'm recommending getting to the next part to you, I would say wait a couple hours, okay? Don't be a rebel like me. Be patient. It's not easy. We're now going to take some of this distressing texture paste and put some stencils on here. But I also want to add a little bit of color because I want everything to kind of match our napkins. So I'm taking a little, bowl here and taking just a tiny bit with my tool. And you don't have to use one of these tools. I've showed it before. You can use a spoon, whatever. It doesn't have to be a fancy schmancy little plastic tool that costs like 99 cents from Ross in a little pack of like mixed things. Don't let me perpetrate like, I'm not fancy, y'all. I'm not, okay? I'm wing it and get it done. Now, I just mixed some colors together until I got 3 that made sense to me with the napkin colors and that I felt I could also blend to get a little bit more colors. You want to make sure that before you do anything like this, you want to try and tape it down. So I used some painter's tape and then held my pointer finger on my left hand at the top of where I wanted it to start and then worked my way down. And I used primarily this color and took some of the other colors and smooshed it in there to give us a little bit of variety. I felt like it matched the hydrangeas, it matched some of the red and the truck, or that's a truck, it's a car. And it just kind of blended on down with our little stencil here. And ooh, look how pretty. And it dried like that. It really did. It dried like, well, you'll see in just a second. I decided to take some butterflies because we had some butterflies in one of our little napkins. And I had different stencils with different butterflies. And since I didn't want to put anything on the handle part, I wanted to actually leave the handle as a whole. I put them going up the handle in different colors. And because I cannot leave well enough alone, I grabbed some stamps. Some were Dollar Tree stamps, some were some off Amazon I had, and just put some in different little sections. Allow this to dry a day and then put whatever sealer you want to put over this. Need some glossy Mod Podge for this DIY Mod Podge hack. And the reason for the glossy over the matte is look at this ceramic candle holder here. It's glossy. We're going to keep most of the piece just like it is and add a little bit of accent to the bottom. See the ridges? They're going to help us create an ombre effect using the color we already have without actually creating an ombre effect. Don't be confused, let me explain. These are 2 Dollar Tree pieces. I took my mica powder paint mixture, I love to call it, and created an ombre effect. I had several people say that they struggle blending and they have a hard time creating ombre. So I want to show you an idea of how you can get a look like this without needing to use 2 colors. And finding a piece that has little raised areas or rigid pieces like this is really going to help increase that effect easily. First, you're going to need to decide which color mica powder you need, and today I've decided to go with black. And people don't start questioning me about the ratio and saying, Brandy, how much to how much? Listen, mix with love, my friends, mix with love. I'm gonna say I do a tappity tap of the mica powder and about a tablespoon of Mod Podge, okay? And then whatever that is. If you think you need some more, add some more. The more mica powder color or pigment you have in here, the deeper and more rich it will be versus, you know, the less it'll be less. I'm going to use a pouncer for this, but feel free to use whatever works best for you. Glass, I like to use like a pouncer or cut up little piece of sponge. Just helps best if I tappity tap 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 on that sucker versus, you know, swiping with a paintbrush. It leaves stripes. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I don't mind doing a paintbrush at the end to smooth it out. But ceramic and glass and smooth surfaces that I'm not prepping, it works best for me. See how we're starting at the bottom and just gingerly working our way up? This is super easy. It literally took me just a few minutes to do, and this stuff dries really, really quickly. You can obviously make the bottom as thick as you want, and then when you're ready to start creating that ombre effect where it's blending into the whites, you start gently tapping up the sides of just the ridges. Then you'll see that you have that white blending into the black towards the bottom on the sides that are more dented in and not the ones that are popping out. Once this is dry, if you want to completely go over it with a clear gloss just so everything looks extremely blended, you can go right ahead, but I didn't on here, so you could see that it looks just fine just like this. For this Mod Podge hack, we're going to be demonstrating by creating a little riser and blending the iron-on method to wood. I'm using the good old faithful matte Mod Podge here. And people, everyone is probably going to have their own opinion on the best way to iron on, and there's nothing wrong with that. We all need to use what works for us. Me personally, I like to take a lot of Mod Podge and slap it all over the sucker that I am about to iron on, and make sure it's a nice, healthy, juicy layer. And then we gotta wait for it to dry like 2 or 3 hours. And then it's time to bring in the iron. And people, feel free to use whatever iron works best for you. I use this little joint because most of the time it's sitting right next to me while I'm crafting. Here is the beautiful napkin that I picked out from my stash. Now, most of the time, and the reason why I said in the beginning, we're going to be blending it to wood is because we are not painting this. We're keeping it neutral. And a lot of people like to paint their backgrounds so this way that the white helps it pop. But I want to show you that sometimes you can take the iron-on method with a napkin, even if it has a white background, that has neutral tones and make it look as though it's part of the wood grain and the wood, and you don't know where the wood ends and the design starts, and it's just simply stunning. Just make sure you get all the sneaky layers off, my friends, okay? You have to make sure that we are just doing this with the top decorative layer, or we're gonna have foof-ups, okay? We're gonna have foof-ups. We don't want that. So the best way to avoid that is to take a second. I like to tear the little corner. Usually it's really quick for me. It reveals them, and then I just separate it. Since the top is all dry with the Mod Podge, you grab your iron and you go on in. Psych! I'm just kidding. How many of you were about to attack me in the comments like, Brandy, you forgot the parchment paper? Guess what? Your girl didn't forget the parchment paper. Now it's time to bring on in the parchment paper. If you've never done the iron-on method before, parchment paper really helps to kind of separate the napkin from the iron. It allows you to be able to take the heat from the iron and press it right on top of this parchment paper, and it really melts the napkin into the Mod Podge without burning the napkin, without ripping anything off of the napkin onto the iron. Sometimes things can melt to the iron as well as damage the design. Sometimes, depending on the inks of things, inks can run and bleed. Once you're happy with your placement, I like to work from one side to the next, and it's a good idea to make sure as you're doing this that your design is flat. Sometimes if you don't, you can get bumps and creases inside of your application. It really takes a couple seconds for that Mod Podge to melt right onto the napkin, and then just roll on with the rest of your project. Feel free to seal over this after it's dry. You can use whatever type of sealer. Do keep in mind that if you're going to put this in an area that's going to get wet, you want to make sure that you use a dishwasher safe topper, sealer, something that is safe with water. Now here I'm showing you how amazing this melts right on to our wood neutral backgrounds. If you have some little neutral pops, even on a white napkin, you can see the white napkin almost takes on the appearance of the wood grains. And please, people, make sure that this is completely ironed on all around your edges before you go sanding around to get the excess off. If it's not, you're gonna have some gaps around the edges and some fraying with your napkin. We're going to need 4 of these palettes for this wire basket hanging storage piece. We're going to start off by removing the pesky tags on the back because we're not going to need those. And then I'm grabbing my little spritzer so I can wet this down. I have painted hundreds of palettes at this point. I've made so many projects. And one thing I've learned is that wetting the palettes or even immersing them in a little tin with water and paint, it gets in all the crevices if you don't have the time or the correct weather to be outside spray painting. So I like to add a little bit of water to these joints, grab my paint color, and everything just goes along really smoothly. Or just paint them regularly. Do you? Don't let me tell you how to paint your palettes. This is just what works best for me. I let the pieces completely dry and then started to arrange them on top of one another like this. And you can make as many of these as you want. You'll see how cool this idea is, and you can really do a lot with it and make several of these if you want, or one large one. You will need to pick these wire baskets up from Dollar Tree or wherever store has some cute little wire baskets that are inexpensive, but the size of these are absolutely perfect. I'm gonna need 2 for my storage organizer, and we're gonna have to also make sure this is really, really sturdy. So whatever we're plopping in our baskets, it holds up as it's hanging on the wall. So I flipped our pieces over in the same position we had them and then grabbed some popsicle sticks. Now, I took a second arranging them and realized that they were a little bit larger and didn't necessarily go over the creases in the sections that I wanted. So I just grabbed my scissors and cut them suckers down. Now it's time to bring in my favorite wood glue to apply on here so we have a nice long-lasting hold. And then when I was done with the placement of that, I brought in the hot glue gun so we could get a quick and immediate hold on these popsicle sticks down in the placement so I could carry on continuing to make this project. And I want to cut real quick to a quick little craft hack. If your glue stick is running out in your glue gun and you did not know about this, heat up the end of one of your new glue sticks with a little smoosh of glue and then insert it in the back so this way it glues to the old stick and allows you a continuous flow of hot glue without having to hold on to the back of the new stick. You're welcome. Now it's time to bring in the stapler because it's not enough that we shoved hot glue and wood glue on this sucker. We need to put some staples on here as well. This is just going to make sure that if you put something that has weight on this, that under no circumstances are the pallets going to come apart. I mean, seriously, there's not much worse than entertaining some people when you're a crafter and then the crafts you have around the house just fall apart. I'm choosing to use sawtooth hammer and hangers for this next part. You can grab these off Amazon. I'm pretty sure I have these linked in my affiliate link down in the description box. You could absolutely use hooks of any kind to just kind of put in here and then hang the baskets, or some zip ties. I felt like these were going to be the best for what I was looking to use this piece for, making sure it was sturdy. Now we're going to need to bring in my wonky hammer. That's what I like to call this thing. It is wonky, right? Like I know people tell me what it is all the time when I'm like, I don't know what it is, but I can never remember. Like, horrible at it. Anyhow, look at how perfect these baskets fit on here. Seriously, like, look at the wire. It literally matches up to the size of the pallets. I love this. These also are perfect for fitting right inside the creases of the pallets. And the hammer tooth hangers, they fit gingerly over top of the gap, ensuring that our wire basket is not going to pop out here. I decided that I wanted to take a little bit of chalk paint and go over these hangers, just so this way they weren't sticking out silver like a sore thumb. For this centerpiece, you're going to need 3 of these palettes, and you can paint them whatever color you want. For this project, I'm going to leave them neutral so they match these little chalkboard houses I grabbed from Dollar Tree. To attach the pieces, I'm going to use my favorite wood glue, and people, this project, it only took me a few minutes. I used the hot glue in opposite sections of where I had the wood glue, and then attached the first piece at the bottom. And then I did the same thing to the sides, and I made sure to flip the palettes so they were backwards and we could see the wood pieces on the sides pop out. To apply the other side of the house, I put the glue in all the little spots that I thought that it needed to go, and then attached the piece that I had already put together on top of that and held it in place for a couple of seconds. I really think that you could use this for so many things, but for sake of staging the video, I just popped some floral foam in here and did my best to arrange some pieces so you guys could see how awesome this piece is. For this hanging wall palette frame, we're going to need 4 of the Dollar Tree palettes, and I'm going to paint mine white. Feel free to paint yours whatever color you want. This is just going to make sense for the decorative art piece that I'm going to be putting on here, so I went with white. You can take this idea and remix it to whatever size you want and use more palettes or less palettes. I'm using 4 palettes because it's going to house a pretty design from my TDS Decoupage Paper line. If you guys did not know, a quick little plug, I do have a decorative decoupage tissue brand. It can be found at the DIYstruggle.com, and there's over 40 prints for you to choose from. To separate the design I chose, I'm going to use a little bit of water on a paintbrush, and people, you can take this idea and remix it using whatever you want. You could use a regular photo for this idea if you want. You could use a napkin. It does not have to be this particular tissue paper. Take the idea and use it to fit your home decor with what works best for you. I trimmed it down so it fit just slightly under the first end of the palette and the top end of the palette in the center. This is because I knew these Dollar Tree wood planks were going to fit perfectly in the center of our palettes so we could frame it. To attach them, I'm going to just use my favorite wood glue and some hot glue and attach them right in the center. I want you to know that if you want to just decoupage over the center of these palettes and not use the planks, you go right ahead. I have decoupaged tons of palettes and left the planks in there and then just cut the designs down. But for this one, I wanted it to actually look like a photo framed completely out in the center. So the wood planks are going to give me that effect, and it's also going to pop out a little bit, giving it more of a high-end look. I picked this little piece up from Home Depot. They have little decorative trims that are like 2 foot and a couple bucks. Well, some are like 6. We're not buying those. This one was a couple bucks. And we're going to need to trim it down and bring in our miter shears for that task. These are perfect for little pieces of wood like this. And I love the fact that we can make adjustments so we can create 45-degree cuts, which are perfect for meeting up in corners. And people, I know I'm making it look easy here, but it's not, especially when you're starting out. I'm just going to be honest. I've literally trimmed out houses and everything else with baseboards. Learning 45-degree cuts and getting them to meet up in corners, it can be difficult. So give yourself some grace and some patience and take your time doing this, okay? Getting it measured perfectly to fit anything, it's not as easy as I make it look. For our medium, we're going to be using Decor Decoupage in the matte, and I'm going to be applying it with a fan brush. Fan brush is one of my favorite ways to apply my decoupage medium whenever I'm using a napkin or some tissue paper. I don't always have fan brushes because I use them so much, and sometimes I forget to clean them. You know how that works out. Anyhow, enough about my paintbrush struggles. I love that I can just take my finger over this and minimize the wrinkles. Absolutely use whatever technique you want to minimize wrinkles whenever you're decoupaging something. I usually don't mind a smidge of wrinkles on something. I know many of you do. So recently I've been using the iron on method more and more, but today I just used my finger, rubbed out this beautiful print on here, and then sanded off any of the excess. Normally, I tell y'all whenever you're sanding, go straight down because that's going to ensure you're not pulling your paper, but I was kind of pushed up against the wall here. There was nowhere for me to push down. A little tip I like to share is if you can see the outline of your decoupage paper and you want to cover that up on whatever you're creating, grab yourself a pouncer or a paintbrush and preferably some chalk paint or some paint that has like the texture ability. I'm using DIY's clay-based paint, and you only need a little bit, not a lot. You can pretty much onload and offload to just make sure that whatever you're pouncing or you're swiping with your paintbrush onto your paper or napkin, it is gingerly covering over the edges. And the reason I say chalk paint or DIY clay base or something like that is because it's thicker. So it's going to rise up to the little bit of a layer that you have to meet the decoupage paper. To attach our frame, I am using some wood glue and some hot glue just around the edges here. And I did decide to paint the frames. So we had a little bit of a pop of color. I think it turned out so good. There are a ton of ways you can reinforce a piece like this. If you are trying to create something like this to resell it, I highly recommend using minimal popsicle sticks on the back. It can look a little gaudy, but you can bring on in your stapler and then plop some staples down where each section meets, and it gives it a higher quality look for something you're going to be putting out in your craft stand. Feel free to use whatever type of hanger you want on the back of this. I just grabbed some Dollar Tree nautical rope and used the stapler to attach it. You can also seal over this, wait until it is completely dry. Use whatever sealer you feel would work best. have our work cut out for us today trying to recreate this large, beautiful piece I found on Etsy. Using 3 of these wood plank pieces from Dollar Tree I felt would be the best to create the base. You could always go to Home Depot and grab some lumber as well. It might be a little bit more inexpensive and you might get more bang for your buck if you don't want to cut them down at home. They will trim it for you. We're just removing all the hangers because we're not going to need them. And then we're going to want to smoosh up these holes so they don't show through and just look like one solid piece of wood. I'm just using some of this stuff that I'm not even really that familiar with, but it happens to be right near my craft text. Okay, we're just winging it. But you use some spackling, you can use some caulking, and I've even smushed texture paste in these suckers in a pinch. A little tip, you can grab some painter's tape, put on the back, and it allows you to prevent extra smudging with whatever you're squeezing in these holes, so you don't have a lot of cleanup. I also used the painter's tape to my advantage, holding the pieces together to prep for our wood glue. I'm gonna take my favorite wood glue and some popsicle sticks to create a base, so this way we have something attaching all of the 3 pieces of our wood planks together. When you're happy with the amount of wood glue you put on there, it's time to bring in the hot glue gun. This is going to give you a quick hold. Make sure not to overlap the hot glue and the wood glue. They kind of cancel each other out. And you might notice that later on down the line, your pieces might pop off in sections. And that could be because you overlap them as you were creating your piece. And I did the same thing for each one of these popsicle sticks that I created the attachment in the back of our decor piece. You can obviously use whatever kind of wood you would like to attach these and arrange these in whatever way fits your crafting style. I'm just sharing with you how I did this, and then I let it dry. For our stain, I'm going to use my good old faithful. This is one of my favorites, my friends. I love Antique Waverly Wax. It's just so easy to apply using a baby wipe. Doesn't have a horrible smell like regular stain, and it takes a couple minutes. For the chalkboard portion, I'm just using one of these little joints from Dollar Tree. You could obviously paint your own chalkboard on here, and you could even create a frame around the piece if you want. I took some of the same stain and applied it right to the top of this. I grabbed some of these self-adhesive hooks from Dollar Tree and thought these would be perfect for this project. And no, we are not going to leave these clear. We're going to grab some chalk paint. It works really well up against plastic, and we're going to put a nice coat on here. This is just some Waverly chalk paint. I grabbed it from Walmart. And a good little tip would also be to plop some Mod Podge over this once it's dry. So anything you put on the hook, it's not going to slowly wear down the paint over time. If you're out of half wood beads or thumbtacks like I am, you can take some googly eyes and paint them suckers up to create little accented pieces. I did the same type of technique with the black chalk paint, so this way everything matched. Here's the little lantern I'm going to be using for this project. It was from Christmas Tree Shops, which doesn't exist anymore. They went out of business. Okay, I'm sorry, I have a meltdown. For the hanger, I'm just going to use a little wood stub. And for anybody wondering why I'm not using like metal hooks and hangers and all this, because that was in the dupe, because I'm not using larger pieces of wood. This is really thin and those pieces are really heavy and it would really weigh this down. So I tried to choose pieces that would hang on the front of this. It did not carry a lot of weight, so it would be evenly distributed as you go to use it and hang pieces on here. For the attachments, I'm just using wood glue and hot glue and then gingerly placing them in the sections that I feel like they make sense. I did grab a Dollar Tree tumbling block to smush underneath of our chalkboard, so this way we had a brace at the lower end of it. So if you're writing on it or you're wiping off the chalk or whatever you have going on here, it's going to hold up and it's not going to bend. You can even take some extra wood glue after everything is dry on a paintbrush and go around all the attachments just to ensure that you're not going to have anything popping off at a later date. I removed the little adhesive pieces on the back of our hooks once everything was completely dry and then put them down in place. I then took a little bit of glue and added our googly eyes right onto the holes over the chalkboard. Use whatever kind of hanger you would like. For this project, I just plopped a nautical rope on the top and I love how it turned out. You're gonna need some transfers for this next idea. You can use whatever you have on hand. Dollar Tree has transfers, or you can visit my website at thediystruggle.com and pick these up from my TDS creative brand. They are called Harmony. You get 2 sheets. They are 8 by 10 in size each, and I absolutely love working with them. These little designs right here I'm cutting out individually so I can sparsely spread them along one of these candle pieces. And people, use as many as you want. I just wanted to do a couple, and truth be told, transfers are not necessarily easy to rub on wax. Even though I have all the confidence in the world in my product and they're really sticky, it still takes some rubbing to get these suckers on here. So I figured just putting a couple down at the bottom would create a beautiful effect, and it really did. I absolutely love this so much. This little plastic card comes with each one of the sets. You can use whatever tool you want to apply your transfers. Just keep in mind that you need to keep checking, so this way the transfer is actually on the wax before you completely lift the clear backing totally off of your candle. Super pretty. I did the same thing for each one of the little transfer designs that I wanted to put on the candle. And then when I was all done and happy with how I had these put on here, I grabbed some matte Mod Podge and went over each one of the transfers and allowed it to dry. Now, I don't recommend y'all taking a taking a fire to this sucker and lighting it on up and burning it. Decorative use only, my friends. That's going to be all for this Dollar Tree home decor mega video, people. Thank you all so much as always for hanging out with me, and until next time.